Welcome back to the Pandemic Guitar Podcast. I'm just going to be up front. This episode is going to be audio only. There's going to be no video to accompany this. So if you're listening on YouTube, don't worry, you're not missing anything there. It's just going to be audio only. We've had some issues. Excuse me. We've had some issues over the last couple of episodes with the software that we are using to produce this podcast. And really what it boils down to is that you have multiple people who the software is recording and uploading your video and your audio and all that stuff. And there's an algorithm in that system to kind of help make sure everything lines up and is good to go on the back end. But when you have somebody that's part of the show, part of the conversation that has slow internet, that algorithm just can't keep up. It just kind of does its own thing. So what would happen is that we would get float. So I would get everything lined up, and then we'd be going along a little bit, doing some editing, and then all of a sudden voices aren't matching up with the mouth anymore. So I would have to go in and kind of cut the frame and then retweak it and retry to line up the audio. And then, boom, fixed, right? Except 30 seconds or 60 seconds down the row or down the line, all of a sudden it's off again. And it just got to be too much of a pain to try to edit 45, 50, 60 minutes of a podcast where the video audio and the video itself just would not stay in sync. So that is why the last couple of episodes have been audio only. So there you go. The more you know. The other thing that you're going to notice that's different right off the bat is that it's just me. I'm the only one here today. So yeah, there's no family banter. There's no dynamics. It's just me. And I'll talk more about that later. But what I wanted to do was get an episode out. I didn't want to just leave the podcast hanging. Okay. Like, everybody's fine. Don't worry about it. But this episode was supposed to be the Wheel of Musicians, Billy Gibbons. And I think it's fair that I go through and at least cover some of the talking points for Billy Gibbons because the work was done. The assignment was completed. We just couldn't get together to record it. So I want to start by going through the Wheel of Musicians, Billy Gibbons, and kind of the key topics, key points that our father, Rick, had done a little bit of research and done the homework on. So I'll start off with how I always like every story with musicians. I like to know where they're born, where they're raised, how are they raised. And in this case, Billy, or full name William Gibbons, he grew up in Houston, Texas, in a home that favored both classical and country music. Now, I don't know if, his parents were heavily into music, if they played instruments or if they were teachers or what have you. But I always find it interesting when the story always begins with either A, an artist grew up in a household where music was relevant, right? Because if it wasn't relative or prevalent, then they probably wouldn't even mention it. And I can't think who it is off the top of my head. I was reading an autobiography and they didn't start the book off that way. In fact, they might as well have said that this artist got into music and just blew up, became big, and there was no musical influence in his childhood. But here they say that Billy grew up in a house that favored classical and country music. So I always think that is really cool. His first guitar was a Gibson Melody Maker paired with a Fender Champ amp that he got for Christmas in 1963. Now, it always boggles my mind when somebody's first guitar is a Gibson. I mean, that's an expensive guitar. I have to imagine that it was as expensive then comparatively to other guitars as it is today. I mean, obviously, you know that I'm going to do some inflation mathematics. If I look at online and I look at, okay, so in 1963, he got this Gibson Melody Maker. Now, I went to a website. I don't remember. I think it was wowblog.com. I can't remember if that's the exact website. But I said, how much did a Melody Maker, a Gibson Melody Maker, cost in 1963? And they didn't have one on the list in 1963. That doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't make one. I don't know. But in 1962, that Melody Maker, a Model D is what I'm guessing here, would have cost about $157, $160 plus tax, title, license, all that stuff. So if you adjust that for inflation, in 2025, that's $1,642 and some change. So if I think of that, the way I think that I'm thinking about it is that $150, $160 guitar in 1963 was a buttload of money. Now, it's kind of hard for me. I wasn't alive. I wasn't born yet in 1963 or 2 or whatever. I grew up in the 80s. I started working in the 90s. And back then, I just remember like a $20 bill was like a gold nugget. I could take a $20 bill to the grocery store or the gas station. I could get everything I needed for that $20 bill. You know, if you had a $50 bill in your pocket, you kind of felt rich. Nowadays, you can barely even go out and get something to eat for $100 for 2 people. Nice meal. Not talking about the fast food restaurants. Still, they're even pricey for what you're getting. But anyway, it just always blows my mind, the cost. Like I just can't believe that, in 1963, $5 or $10 was a lot of money. And again, I wasn't alive then, so I don't know, but I find that interesting. So then very shortly after, at 14 years of age, he formed his first band called the Saints. And I don't think that necessarily lasted too long. I mean, you got to keep in mind that he got his first guitar in 1963, and by 1969, ZZ Top was formed. So we're only talking, 6 years? In 6 years, he got a guitar, formed his first band, the Saints, and then somewhere, I don't know, a couple years later, he joined, Billy Gibbons joined a band called the Coachmen. And that band was inspired by, artists of the like of Jefferson Airplane and Jimi Hendrix. And then a little bit later, the Coachmen renamed to the Moving Sidewalks. And it was funny because when I was kind of doing a little bit of my own research and kind of looking through these notes and kind of trying to get some foundation based on what this show is supposed to be about, I saw a picture of Billy Gibbons with the band, the Moving Sidewalks, and it was almost like a high school yearbook photo. And it was them. They played at a prom, and I saw in some Reddit threads that people were like, "Oh yeah, they played for us, but they were known by this band." Or it was just kind of crazy, and that'd be awesome. I think that would be awesome to, like I know that we have one listener who used to cut the hair of a young member of Slipknot. So how cool is that to have been this close to somebody? Just that close to somebody who will later become mega famous, worldwide known. Just how cool is that? That just blows my mind. And it also blows my mind how somebody who can, again, he didn't get his first guitar till 63. And at 14, he formed the band The Saints. There's a very small window there. So I think are people just born with the talent? I've been trying to seriously learn how to play guitar since mid-2000. I'm going to get into this a little bit later as well, but mid-2000, I've seriously tried to pick up the guitar, and it started off slow, but I try to play at least 15 minutes every day, even if I'm stuck in a rut and playing the same things over and over again. And I have internet. I have all these resources at my fingertips to learn, and it's taken me this long to get to where I am, and I still do not know enough where I could get with a group of people and jam and make any sense. But here you have Billy Gibbons, who, 14, gets a guitar, 14, starts a band, boom, band, boom, band, boom, ZZ Top. Remember I said in 1969, Billy banded together with bassist Dusty and drummer Frank to form that band. And then, of course, years and years of making music and performances. ZZ Top is among the greats of bands. And it just blows my mind. Then a little bit later, much later in his career, earliest one I found was in 2015, where Billy had some solo albums in 2015, like I said. Perfectamundo, I guess that's how you're going to say it, is Perfectamundo in 2015. The Big Bad Blues 2018. Hardware 2021. And Cruising with Billy F. Gibbons in 2025. So he had some solo albums. And those are at least 4 that I've found. And I did actually listen to Hardware and Big Bad Blues today. And they're pretty damn good albums. Like, check them out. And then also in 2021, he released Jingle Bell Blues. That's got to go on your Christmas playlist. It absolutely has to. That was a good tune. And it's March. And here I am sitting in the office just kind of scrolling through my online music library. And here I am. I got my headphones on, obviously. And I'm jamming out to some Christmas music because it's good. Put that on your Christmas playlist. Just like Baby It's Cold Outside, or whatever the heck the name of that song is. Because supposedly that's offensive. Whoever said that isn't looking at what's currently coming out on the charts. So yeah, solo career. Very cool. The gear. The gear. I wish that I geeked out over gear as much as my dad does. I don't think, I feel very confident in saying this. I don't think that I've heard anybody or know of anybody personally who gets as excited about gear as Dad. Like, he just geeks out over it. It's amazing. Like, it just wows me to see people just absorb that. Like, I want to know more, learn, play, tinker, perfect. Just absolutely amazing. So in the early days, he used some Marshall Plexi amps. But currently he performs with the Marshall JMP1 tube and Marshall 9200 power amps, as well as an MXR SM288 bass octave deluxe pedal. Apparently he's got, air quotes here, folks, crate amps that are on stage, and they're just for show. Supposedly he doesn't even use them. Now, I have a couple little amps, nothing big, nothing fancy. But I guarantee you I have nothing that compares to a Marshall JMP1 or a Marshall 9200. I didn't even look to see how much those items cost. You got me. That's crazy. Guitars, he uses Fender Esquires, also known as Bones, 58 Gibson Flying V, a Gibson Les Paul 50th Anniversary Gold Top, Fender Telecasters. I guess he's got a Gretsch in there. It's a signature model, also known as Billy Bo. But here's what's cool, is that he still uses that melody maker, his first guitar. Like, how cool is that, right? That, to me, that shows that somebody is very humble and down to earth. Like, this is my first guitar. I have my first guitar still. I'm actually replacing the neck on it. The neck that came with it had a minor imperfection, and it just got to the point where I just couldn't keep the neck straight anymore. I was constantly half a turn left, half a turn right. It's just a weak neck. It happens. So I bought a new neck. Well, it's a used neck. And the goal was to just swap the parts over. But the tuning knobs and the machine heads, whatever you want to call them, they don't quite fit. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of tweaking to get them to fit right. But I still have that guitar. I'll always have that guitar. I'm pretty sure I'll always have that guitar. And then strings, obviously, everybody has their preference, but he uses the extra light gauge Dunlop string known as the Reverend Willie's Mexican Lottery brand. I've never heard of that before, but it is cool. I love when companies, especially strings, guitar strings, it's too easy to give them funny little names and make them more interesting compared to just calling these light electric gloss or whatever boring name. I don't want to reach in front of me and pick up a set of strings to see what they are, but I know that they're a boring name. I can promise you they're a boring name. So that's really what we had for Billy Gibbons. And of course, I know that if all three of us were on here, there would be a little bit more conversation and a little bit more inquiry and a little bit more depth. So I apologize to you for that. I'm going to finish or round out this episode, and it might be a short episode. I'm only right about 17 minutes as we sit. I want to say that, everybody's okay, all good in the hood. But podcasting is something that I got into I was always curious about it from the first time I heard it, but I never knew how to do it or what to do. And, just figured if it wasn't something I could do, like writing a web page or something like that. And I know somebody out there is like, really? Writing a web page is simple? For me, it is. I just that's what I grew up doing, so I know that. I wish I would have spent more time learning how to play guitar while I was young, but I didn't. So yeah, when you do a podcast, it takes a lot of time and effort, and you eventually, no matter how hard you try, you're going to run into scheduling conflicts, busy work schedule, family or pet emergencies. You're going to run into issues. It's not the easiest thing to do because consistency is what's key in podcasting. And I'm going to break right there, and I'm going to kind of go back and kind of reiterate the tale of, the pandemic guitar podcast. As I said, I was getting into podcasting. I've got some friends that do other shows. And I had met a friend out at a training school, and talking to him, I was like, we get along great, blah, blah, blah. We should start a podcast. And so we did. And we get together every pay period through an online platform. You insert anyone you want there, and, we shoot the breeze for 30 minutes or 35 or 40 minutes. And then we take that and we do some fancy editing, and then we put it out there. And if you want to listen, you can listen. It's kind of fun because it's a way to just say, hey, we want to take this break out of our busy lives to connect, to talk, to catch up. And it's not that big of a deal if you have to adjust a day left or a day right. It's just consistency. I go back to consistency. But anyway, in 2000, just shortly before 2000, like right after Christmas, going into the new year, I don't know why exactly, but I decided that I really wanted to dedicate time in my life to learning guitar. And so I thought about it for about a month, and I kept thinking about it, and that need, that want just got a little bit stronger. And then at the end of February, I did security for a local event, and I don't charge them because they're a nonprofit. They're really trying to raise money to keep themselves, their club, afloat. So I don't really charge them. I'm supposed to, but I don't. And plus I have fun. Anyway, that year they wrote me a small check, nothing huge, nothing big, not as much as the contract said they were supposed to pay me, but something is better than nothing. And so I left that event and I detoured on my way home to my local Guitar Box. And I'll give Guitar Box that they were busy. They were busy. But I walked into that store and I looked at the wall of guitars and kind of moseyed around to the other areas and then back to the wall of guitars. And I was there for 45 minutes, maybe close to an hour. It's obviously 5 years ago now. I don't exactly remember. But nobody acknowledged my existence. Nobody from the store, not a single customer, nobody. So I finally left. I got in my car and I called my dad and I told him the story. The next day, I get a phone call and it's my dad. And he says, "Hey, do you still want to get a guitar?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I do." He's like, "All right, well, meet me at Guitar Box. Can you meet me at Guitar Box?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" So I went there and he got me a good enough deal on the guitar that I was looking at that I had a little bit of extra money, so I was able to buy a good set of audio headphones. It's the set that I wear to this day. If you watch any of the video episodes that we have, you could see them. I think they're a good brand. They've worked well. I don't have any reason to upgrade. But I still have those. I still have that guitar. I still have the headphones. And of course, obviously, if you've been following along, I've purchased several guitars since then. So shortly after that, I remember the Star Spangled Banner was the first song that I actually learned how to play front to back. It's the only song I know how to play front to back, actually. But drove my wife nuts because now she's got to listen to me play this one song over and over and over and over again. But much better now. I can change it up a little bit. She doesn't get so frustrated. But it wasn't until about 2 years later, actually. I think it was August by the time, because it would have been 2 years later, which is hard for me to believe that it took 2 years to get from buying that first guitar to doing this podcast. But that's the truth. I had mentioned to Dad, why don't we do a podcast about guitars, about music? It'd be fun. I can learn some stuff, gives us a reason to catch up. Plus, we're both tech geeks. We're both computer nerds. There's probably some things, I know there's a lot of things in computers that he knows that I don't, but over the years I found that there's a lot of things in computers that I know that he doesn't. And it's just because I think we both love technology, but we both kind of focused on different aspects of technology. And of course, there's so many different avenues that you could run down. It's crazy to even meet somebody that knows the same stuff you do. Like they geek out on the same stuff you do. So finally, I told Dad, because we had talked about it, about doing the podcast. Finally, I told Dad, we either need to shit or get off the pot. If we're going to do this podcast, we need to do it. Otherwise, let's just forget it. And so we started it. We did it. And it took a little bit to find our groove. But, we started to. It was fun. I enjoyed it. And then by episode 5, Amanda came in and was part of it. And I liked it. I was all about the family together and having a common ground to communicate and talk on. It was great. And so throughout the time, we've tried to find different things to do, so it's not the same old boring stuff. And I know that we've even kind of tried to promise a few things, like an interview of a certain artist that I just couldn't make it happen. When I was able to communicate with him, he's just busy. I get it. Like, that's his work. That's what he does. And yeah, you could argue that he should be promoting himself. But honestly, if you're so dang busy that you don't have time to promote yourself, if you are an artist and you are so busy playing gigs that you don't have time to promote it on a podcast, well, then you don't need my podcast. You're doing great. So yeah, just doesn't happen. So anyway, going back to what I said before I started this ramble, is that life gets in the way. I've had people ask me, oh, we should start a podcast, or how do I start a podcast? And I always tell everybody, number one, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is consistency. Number two, what is your subject matter? Got your subject matter, great. How often do you plan on releasing an episode, and how long is that episode? Because you have to be consistent. So for us, and I think we moved around a little bit, whatever. For us, it was every other Thursday, 0500 is when the episode lands. And I chose 0500 because statistically, in Central Time, where we're located, that's a good time, East Coast, to drop a podcast. For me, I know that podcast is out and available so that when people that I know around me that may be listening to this episode, they're getting up early, they're going to work, that episode is there and ready for them to listen to on their way to work. Now, we eventually settled on the 45-50 minute time frame. And sometimes we went a little long, sometimes we were a little short, but that's kind of where we were sitting at, is that 45-minute mark, which is also a good mark to have. Unless you're some big famous podcast that can go for hours and people will just listen in bits and pieces throughout the day or whatever. Now, if your podcast is going to be 45 minutes, how are you doing it? That's the other thing that you have to look at. How are you doing it? Do you want a certain quality of audio? Okay, well, now you're buying microphones and audio interfaces and all this other equipment. I don't even want to know what it adds up to. Then if you decide, which is where the industry is going, that you want to also do video so that you have audio and video, because video, the popularity of video podcasts is on the rise. Okay, well, you do an hour-long episode. Go ahead and just plan on taking a minimum of 4 hours after the fact to go through and clean up your audio and go into your video editing software and do all these things. So for most of your guests, it's 45, 50 minutes, maybe an hour on a long day. But for you as the host, as the producer, that's really 5 hours or 6 hours of your life. And probably closer to 6 if you have to do social media. So anyway, long story short, is in order to gain a following, which, looking at the numbers, I think we did pretty well. If you think about it, there's supposedly 400 some plus million. I've heard numbers everywhere from 400 million all the way up to 800 million. But from what I can see, it's estimated that there's 450 plus million podcasts out there. Now, not all of them are active because most podcasts won't get past episode 5 or episode 10 because they realize how much time and effort goes into a podcast. You have to truly want to do this. Which also means that when all those things in your life pop up, work, family emergencies, whatever, holidays, weddings, when all those things come up and they interfere with your scheduling, you have to choose what is more important. either that event or the podcast? Do I have the ability to move this podcast around? And if you have multiple hosts, you have to figure out how to shuffle multiple people's schedule. Well, that's what happened here with the Pandemic Guitar Podcast. Life is getting hectic. It's getting crazy. We've got work things going on. We've got everyday life things going on. And it just got to the point where it was more of a chore to create a podcast than it was to actually sit down and do it. It was more of a chore to do this podcast, to spend the 5 hours of my week to do this podcast than anything else, if that makes sense. So yeah, this is the end of the tour. I don't know if this is the end of Pandemic Guitar forever or not. I really don't. All I know is that this is the current end. And if this podcast decides to start back up, well, I hope everybody is watching and listening. But I promise you that if we decide to start this podcast up again, it will be like starting from scratch. Again, going back to consistency is the key. If you set up a schedule and your audience finds you, they know that your content drops on this day at this time. And even when, oh crap, this happened, I'm going to be a day late. The majority of your audience will forgive you, but you're going to lose a lot of audience because you just broke consistency. You broke your promise. You started a podcast. I started a podcast. And I promised that I was going to deliver an episode that was going to be approximately this long every 2 days at 05 CST. And I just can't do it anymore. I just can't. Maybe 5 months, 6 months down the road, maybe that'll be different. But again, it's going to be like starting over. So a little over 3.5 years, we've been doing this. This is episode 69. Definitely not the number that I wanted to stop on, for sure. But anyway, I started this podcast because I just wanted to be able to have that excuse, that reason to make it a point to sit down with my dad and have something that we have in common, to talk about, to learn. Maybe it's, you get to that point where you're looking at the halfway mark, or at least you're assuming you're at the halfway mark, right? And you're like, shit. People they're not around forever. And when somebody goes, all their knowledge, all their talent goes with them unless it gets passed on. And I think that was kind of my initial goal, but it was fun. The whole thing was really just to, have some banter, have some laughs, learn something along the way. And I think we did that. I mean, I've learned so many things over the past 68 episodes, a bunch of new guitar licks and a bunch of new techniques, definitely more comfortable with playing around with effect pedals and some of the technology. I've learned to appreciate music, like actually appreciate it, listen to it. Not every song has to have a catchy beat or a catchy chorus to be a good song. I've actually found a lot of blues and rock songs that have no words at all, that are just absolutely amazing because you get to sit back and just kind of take the journey. And it's so cool. I never did that before this podcast. So anyway, I do want to apologize to Rick and Amanda for not giving them the opportunity to be on this last and final episode. I am a jerk for depriving them of that. But just the way that everything kind of fell into place, it was a little late. So again, for you, the listener, I wanted to make sure that you got a final sign off from us and not just a ghost. Like, we didn't just ghost you, fall off the face of the planet. That's all there is to it. So thank you for listening. Appreciate all your support, and who knows, maybe you'll get to hear us again in the future. Keep on playing, or don't. We won't tell.